I never thought changing a debit card PIN would make me my daughter-in-law's worst enemy. But at exactly 4:43 p.m. on a muggy Tuesday, I stood just outside my own kitchen, back pressed to the hallway wall, and heard Keisha's voice crackling through the phone on speaker. "Honey, your mom changed the password. I can't use her card for shopping anymore." Her tone was sharp, inconvenienced, like I'd hidden her purse instead of protecting my own money. I stayed still, barely breathing, the new PIN activation slip still warm in my pocket. I'd just gotten back from the Wells Fargo on Mint Street, where Miss Jordan, bless her steady hands and quiet urgency, had sat with me in the glass cubicle and said, "You did the right thing, Ms. Monroe. It's your account. You don't owe explanations for boundaries." But I'd known there would be fallout. I just didn't expect to catch it so soon. From the hallway, I could hear the click of ice in Keisha's glass. She was in my kitchen, bold as brass, chatting like I was already gone. "What do you mean she changed it?" Jamal's voice came next, muted and tight. "She must have gone to the bank this morning. I tried using it at Sephora and it declined. Twice. Then at Target. Nothing. She cut me off without saying a word." "You sure it's not fraud alerts?" Jamal asked, still clinging to rationalizations. "Oh, please. I checked. She changed the settings. New PIN. New password. My guess? She don't trust me anymore." Something about the way she said it made me flinch. Not because she was wrong. She was exactly right. But because of the bite underneath, the arrogance of someone who thought my silence meant approval. I backed away from the wall and slipped back into my bedroom, hand trembling slightly as I pulled out my phone. I opened the voice memos app and hit record, just in case. The audio caught the last bit of Keisha's breathy frustration. She must think she's slick. But I swear, if she thinks she's done with us, click. I stopped the recording and stared at the screen. 39 seconds of raw evidence. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew better than to ignore what I'd just heard. I'd spent the morning protecting my future. Keisha had spent the afternoon complaining about the closed tap. And in 20 minutes, when Jamal came through that front door, I knew exactly what storm would follow. At 5:03 p.m., the front door slammed open so hard the chime bounced against the walls. I was seated at the dining table, pen in hand, journal open, the ink still drying on the sentence I'd written in all caps. No more denial. Jamal came in hot. His fists clenched. His face flushed with disbelief, not worry. "Why would you do that, Ma?" I looked up, calm, though the fury bubbling inside me made it hard to keep my voice level. "Do what, Jamal?" His eyes flicked to the side as if scanning for Keisha behind me, as if hoping I'd stutter or explain myself away like I always used to. "Change the PIN. Shut her out like that." She was in tears. I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch like taut rope. Across the table sat my locked leather journal, thick with entries, each one documenting a withdrawal, a favor, a promise made on their behalf, and quietly broken. A private archive of all the things they claimed to forget. I let my gaze fall on the envelope beside me. Inside, the same-day receipt from Wells Fargo, stamped 10:31 a.m. It confirmed the account access update, authorization revoked, online password changed, PIN reset. Keisha no longer had access, and neither did Jamal. "You could have talked to us first," he said, pacing now. "You made it seem like we were a team." "A team," I repeated, more to myself than to him. "Is that what we've been?" He stopped moving, his brow creased, confused by my tone. But he still didn't sit down. Behind him, the late afternoon light spilled in through the slatted blinds, warming the oak cabinets and the laminated menu still magneted to the fridge. Top China takeout, Keisha's favorite. "Ma, we've had some tight months. You know that. You've always helped. Why now, out the blue?" "It's not out the blue," I said. "You just haven't been paying attention." That landed. He shifted, guilt flickering across his face like a film reel skipping frames. I stood slowly, journal in hand, and pressed it to my chest like a shield. My mind flashed to the balance in my checking account. $75,000 exactly, thanks to the wire I'd redirected from my annuity that morning. "You might want to take a minute before deciding how loud you plan to get, Jamal," I said quietly, "because you don't know everything, and I'm not scared of you finding out." He stared at me, silent now, Maybe for the first time in years, he realized I wasn't asking permission to protect myself. 2 weeks earlier, I was hunched over a shopping cart in the parking lot of Harris Teeter, the sun already dipping low behind the Presbyterian Hospital, groceries sweating in plastic bags. I had just loaded a 24-pack of water bottles into the trunk of Keisha's car. She sat in the front seat with the AC running, scrolling her phone, lips pursed like I'd kept her waiting. "Make sure you got the oat milk," she'd called out as I shut the trunk. "Jamal likes it in his smoothies." I nodded, always nodding. Back then, I still believed in the soft myth of reciprocity. If I gave enough, stayed helpful, stayed small, they'd eventually see me. Not as a wallet, not as a fallback, but as family. I remember how my joint screamed that day. I'd driven them across town to 3 stores, Aldi, then CVS, then finally Harris Teeter. Because Keisha said, they don't keep the good brands all in one place. No thank you. No gas money. Just a, "You're a lifesaver," tossed over her shoulder like loose change. That same week, she'd asked me to call Dr. Penn's office on her behalf. "They don't listen when I call," she'd said, feigning sweetness through a smirk. "Can you just take care of the insurance thing? You know how to talk to them." Of course I'd called. I'd even fronted the $842 for the root canal and told her, "Just pay me back when you can." Keisha sent a pink heart emoji. That was the last I heard about repayment. The memory of that invoice was still sharp as I sat at my dining table later that day, my fingers resting on the dented manila envelope where I kept every receipt, every gallon of milk, every medicine refill, every bailout disguised as helping. I hadn't looked at that stack in months, but now I ran my hand across it like an archaeologist brushing off a long-buried relic. Each slip of paper told a story I'd tried too long to forget. I'd spent $267 just the week before on groceries, mostly snacks and frozen things, whatever Keisha threw into the cart. I drove them home, helped unload, and left with an empty trunk and an ache in my shoulder that stayed for days. She always said thank you, but it was the same thank you you'd offer a cashier or a doorman. Quick, transactional, meant to keep things moving. It didn't feel like gratitude, it felt like habit. The first time Keisha ever called me Mom was in a leasing office on Beatty's Ford Road, and I should have known then it was a setup. It was a sticky afternoon in March 2023, the kind where the humidity clings to your clothes like regret. We were seated across from Mr. Tate, a soft-spoken leasing manager in a crisp shirt, who raised his eyebrows as he scanned the forms. "You sure you want to co-sign this?" he asked gently, tapping the paper where my name was printed, bold as gospel. 12-month lease. "Any missed payments? It's on you." Keisha slid her hand into mine like it meant something. "Come on, Mom," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "We've got steady income now. We just need a little help getting in the door." Jamal didn't even look up from his phone. I signed. They'd been evicted from their Atlanta apartment 3 weeks earlier. Said the landlord was crooked. Said they needed a fresh start in Charlotte, closer to real family. That was the phrase they used in the car ride up. Real family. I'd nodded, driving with my savings in my purse and hope like a weight in my chest. The rent was $1,100 a month, not including utilities. I told myself it was temporary, just until they got settled, just until things stabilized. That's what Jamal always said, "Just until we get stable, Ma." But each month, the rent transfer came from my account, not theirs. Every promise of reimbursement became an apology, then a delay, then silence. By August, I stopped asking. Keisha never said thank you after that first month. She'd breezily mention the AC not working or that the Wi-Fi had gone out, like I was property management. She'd text me things like, "Can you call the power company?" They trippin' again. As if I was her assistant instead of her elder. At church, when someone asked where they were living, I'd smile and say, "Oh, just nearby," swallowing the truth like a stone. Because saying it out loud, that I was paying for a place I'd never been invited to, would have sounded like weakness. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was how quickly Keisha learned to wield intimacy like a tool. She used that mom word like a key, unlocking access to things I didn't even realize I'd locked. She only ever called me that when something needed to be signed. That night, once the house was quiet and the air had cooled enough to make the windows sweat, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The soft whir of the fan beside me was the only sound in the room as I clicked open the spreadsheet I'd named Discretionary Support. A bland title, but deliberate. Keisha once asked if she could use my laptop, and I didn't want curiosity to lead her somewhere she had no business being. I hadn't touched that file in over a year, but the numbers had been building in my head for weeks like pressure behind a dam. It was time to name it all. Line by line, I entered everything. Rent, $1,100 a month, 24 months straight. That came to $26,400. Groceries, $267 most weeks. Some higher when Keisha insisted on name brands and Jamal wanted seafood. Rounded down to $3,600. Furniture from Value City for their new place, $2,500 in one weekend. I'd put it all on my card, while Keisha pointed out accent chairs and Jamal disappeared to take a call. The receipt was still tucked in my sock drawer. Then there was the credit card I'd paid off for them after an unexpected dip in income, Keisha's words, said with dramatic flair and zero detail. $6,000 wiped clean, with nothing but a promise to do better next time. Keisha's car, a navy blue Honda with peeling tint and dreams of luxury, $3,000 for the down payment. I hadn't even seen the vehicle in person. By the time I totaled it all, the number blinked back at me like a dare. $41,500. $41,500. I leaned back and let the chair creak beneath me, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slow and steady above. That money could have paid off my mortgage early. Could have gone toward the little travel fund I'd set up after my retirement. Could have been used to redo the kitchen the way I'd always dreamed. Instead, it had bought silence. Bought my own erasure, one transaction at a time. I scrolled down the document and added a final row. Emotional cost. Incalculable. I shut the laptop gently and turned off the desk lamp, the room falling into soft shadows. That spreadsheet wasn't for them. It was for me, to remember that I wasn't crazy, that generosity without respect is exploitation in pearls. It was a Sunday in July when I noticed the Amazon box, rectangular, taped neatly, sitting on my front porch like it belonged there. I wasn't expecting anything, and I hadn't used my Prime account in months. But there it was, addressed not to me but to Keisha. Same last name, different first. My address. Her purchase. I stood there for a moment, the midday sun pressing down on my shoulders, staring at that label, the barcode, the weight, the neat font that read, K. Monroe. I didn't bring it inside right away. Instead, I went back in and checked my email. Sure enough, tucked between a pharmacy refill reminder and a church bulletin, was an order confirmation from Amazon. $213.38. Items: contour makeup kit, Bluetooth headphones, some kind of waist trainer. I hadn't bought any of it. I stepped back outside and took a photo of the box, then another of the shipping label. I emailed them to myself with a short subject line. Keisha, July 2024, my address. When I confronted her later that evening, casually, like I was just curious, Keisha didn't miss a beat. Oh yeah. It was cheaper to ship it here, she said, barely looking up from her phone. Our building's packages keep getting stolen. I nodded, feigning understanding. But something in my chest tightened. Not because of the lie. It was almost elegant in its simplicity, but because of how effortlessly she delivered it. Like this was normal. Like using someone's account, someone's address, someone's trust was just another life hack. Later, I opened the USPS tracking email. It had been delivered while I was at Bible study. That explained why she'd swung by unannounced that afternoon, all sweetness and sugary small talk. I'd let her in, offered her lemonade. She'd asked how my back was holding up. She'd picked up that box on the way out without missing a step. She didn't even ask. That night, I saved a screenshot of the purchase in a folder on my desktop. I named red flags. I didn't know then how many files would join it, but I had a feeling this wasn't the last time I'd find her signature in my life where it didn't belong. The dollar amount wasn't devastating. What rattled me was the entitlement. By mid-September, the little inconsistencies had become patterns, and the patterns began to reek. I remember the exact date, September 15th, because I was standing at the counter inside the Wells Fargo on Freedom Drive, staring down at my transaction history like it was written in a foreign language. I hadn't bought anything from Sephora, not in years. I hadn't set foot in Zara since they closed the Uptown location. But the charges were there. 4 Sephora purchases, 1 Zara, each marked pending, each between $89 and $137, all within the past week. The running total was $649.58. Not groceries, not gas, not bills, makeup, and fast fashion. I turned to Ms. Jordan, the same bank officer who'd helped me set up my annuity transfer earlier in the year. She leaned in closer, adjusting her glasses as I pointed at the screen. "Do these look familiar?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "No, and I haven't given my card to anyone. Not recently." She hesitated. "You did have an authorized user listed earlier this year for online access." My heart sank. I'd forgotten. Keisha had helped me order a set of curtains online back in January and needed the login just for one night. I never changed the password afterward. She'd had access for months. "I can flag the transactions, cancel the card, and help you file a dispute," Ms. Jordan said. "But we'll need to close out your online access too. If someone's been logging in, they could see more than just your checking." Her tone was respectful, but underneath it I heard the message. "They've been watching you longer than you think." I signed the necessary forms, hands steady even as my chest boiled. While Ms. Jordan clicked through tabs on her screen, I stared at the scrolling list of other purchases. DoorDash deliveries I hadn't eaten, Uber charges when my car sat parked. Little things that added up to something monstrous. Keisha had always said she used my card for just a few groceries, but she never mentioned $48 lip gloss or silk blouses shipped express. That evening, back at home, I printed the statement and tucked it into the growing binder labeled simply, "Proof." I didn't say anything to Jamal or Keisha that night. Not yet. I was past confrontation. I was preparing my case. October 2nd came in overcast and heavy, the kind of day where even the air felt tired. I was in the living room folding laundry, slow and deliberate, letting the quiet stretch across the space like a balm. Then the door flew open. Jamal's voice arrived before he did. "You think we're stealing from you?" he shouted, the words knifing through the house, sharp and unexpected. He was already halfway across the room before I could put the basket down. No greeting, no lead-in, just accusation, burning hot. I stayed seated on the couch. I'd learned that standing up just gave them more momentum. He stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Keisha said you froze the card. Change the login. You think we're out here scamming you?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, not the child I raised, but the man who hadn't called me mama in months. His eyes were wild, not with grief or confusion, but with offense. How dare I set a boundary? "I didn't say anything to either of you," I said evenly. "I just changed what's mine." His laugh was bitter, hollow. "Wow, so we're enemies now? After everything we've been through?" He began pacing, his sneakers scuffing the hardwood, his voice rising like a tide. "You act like we're criminals. We've been under pressure, Ma. We're trying to get on our feet. But instead of helping, you get paranoid. Start locking everything up like we're out to rob you. Pressure. That's what he called it. Not manipulation, not siphoning. Pressure. You didn't even talk to me," he continued. "You just cut us off. What kind of family does that?" I could have listed receipts. I could have opened the binder in the side drawer and shown him how many months I'd paid rent, how many statements I'd printed in silence. Instead, I folded another towel and said, "I'm not cutting you off, Jamal. I'm stepping back." He didn't like that. He slammed the door so hard behind him the frame shook. Then came the voicemail. Less than an hour later, his voice buzzed through the phone speaker, cracked with heat. "If you're going to start acting like we're the problem, then maybe we just need to stop coming around." I played it twice, then saved it under a new file name. The following Sunday, I set the table for 3, pulled out the good china, and lit the cinnamon candle Keisha once claimed gave her migraines. I was tired of pretending. I wanted the setting to reflect the reality. This wasn't peace. It was a summit. They arrived with dessert in hand, store-bought pound cake dusted in too much sugar. Keisha wore lipstick I'd never seen before, a bold plum that looked expensive. Jamal looked exhausted, though whether from work or from rehearsing what they were about to say, I couldn't tell. We sat in the kitchen beneath the soft hum of the ceiling fan. I ladled stew into their bowls, keeping my voice pleasant, practiced. The script in my head was careful, clipped. I was ready to explain my choices calmly, to open a door to discussion without opening myself to manipulation. Keisha complimented the seasoning. Jamal asked if I needed help with bills. I waited. It didn't take long. Halfway through the meal, Keisha reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and said with a smile so wide it threatened to split her face, "By the way, Mama, can you send your Wells Fargo login again?" I think I lost it when I changed phones. Just like that. No tension in her voice, no hesitation, as if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't spent weeks spending behind my back and calling it love. I sipped my water. Jamal watched me carefully, chewing slower now. "You said you weren't cutting us off," he offered. "And I'm not," I said, folding my napkin. "But I'm not giving out passwords anymore either." Keisha blinked, then laughed. "It's just to check something for you. I was going to make sure your automatic payment for the power bill went through." "I've got it handled," I said. "Everything's on autopay now." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes flickered. They finished their cake in silence. I cleared the dishes alone while they stood near the door, pretending not to be irritated. On her way out, Keisha gave me a sideways hug and whispered, "You don't have to make things harder than they are." I didn't respond. I was too busy trying to remember the exact wording of the text she'd sent 2 days before. "Don't forget to bring your Wells Fargo login, Mama Smile." I'd screenshotted it and printed it on cream cardstock. Slid it right into the attempts tab in the binder. They thought dessert would make me forget. By October 10th, I had run out of second chances to give. The doorbell cam footage did something to me. Watching it alone that night, volume low, brightness dimmed, I saw exactly what I needed to see. Keisha, mid-afternoon, in a hoodie despite the heat, standing at my mailbox. Her movements were quick but not rushed. She opened it with a key I hadn't realized she still had, pulled out a thick envelope, my insurance renewal notice, and looked around before slipping it into her purse. She didn't know I'd upgraded my doorbell camera that summer. She didn't know it auto-saved to the cloud, or that I had the footage downloaded and labeled, "Mailbox, October 9th, 3:12 p.m. I watched it 3 times, not because I was in disbelief, but because I needed to feel every part of it. The trespass, the entitlement, the routine of it. After the video ended, I sat very still at my desk, staring at the paused frame, Keisha turning away, her braids swinging behind her shoulder, her mouth set in that familiar smirk. I didn't cry. I'd cried already. In grocery store parking lots, in my car after rent transfers, in church pews, where I told myself forgiveness was strength. But tonight was different. This wasn't heartbreak. This was clarity. They'd been texting all week, too. Jamal asking if I was still mad. Keisha sending photos of her new home office setup like I was supposed to be impressed, as if the makeup desk she bought with my money somehow made things right. I didn't respond to any of it. I just sat there, sorting files into color-coded tabs, printing what I needed, flagging what I didn't. The binder was now 3 inches, thick and heavy, in a way that made my shoulder ache when I carried it to the kitchen. I took out my yellow notepad, the same one I used for grocery lists, and wrote a title in block letters, "Next Steps." Below it, a list. Freeze shared card change online login. Remove authorized users. Notify Ms. Jordan document mailbox footage. Consult Trina. I drew a thick line beneath the last item. Then, in smaller print, no more conversations, only actions. I left the binder open on the kitchen table. I wanted to see it each time I passed by. Saturday morning, October 12th, I walked back into Wells Fargo, this time wearing my church dress, the navy one with the pressed pleats and the belt that made me feel composed. I didn't want to look vulnerable. I wanted to look unmistakably in control. Ms. Jordan recognized me right away and ushered me into her office, closing the glass door behind us. She didn't ask how I was. She saw it in my face. "I'm ready," I said, sitting down and opening the black folder I'd brought. "Let's do everything we talked about." I want it all secured. Cards, accounts, beneficiaries. No more access, not even viewing rights. Ms. Jordan pulled up my profile and nodded. "We'll start with the debit card." "You're freezing the current one?" "Freezing and reissuing," I said. "Different number. New PIN. I'll memorize it and destroy the slip. I also want to remove both Jamal and Keisha as authorized users. Permanently. And online banking? she asked. Changed this morning. New password, two-factor authentication turned on. I used your checklist. She smiled faintly at that. And savings? She asked. Same. Locked down the $12,000 in there. I also want to unlink my accounts from any third-party payment apps. Cash App, Zelle, Venmo, all of it. Miss Jordan's fingers flew across the keyboard. I'm proud of you, Ms. Monroe. I looked out the window, watched a couple walk past the bank, hand in hand, carefree. I used to want that again. Family unity, warmth around the table. But now I wanted peace. Just peace. Not the illusion. The real thing. They're going to throw a fit, I said softly. She paused, typing. Let them. Boundaries make people uncomfortable when they're used to access. When the last change was confirmed, she printed a receipt showing all modifications. It was dated, time-stamped, October 12th, 2024, 11:58 a.m. I slid it into my folder next to the statement, showing the full $75,000 still untouched in checking. When I stood to leave, Ms. Jordan handed me the newly issued debit card. It's about time, Ms. Monroe, she said, squeezing my hand. You've been generous long enough. Outside, the autumn air felt sharper, cleaner. I walked back to my car without checking my phone. Jamal's last text still sat there, unread. Why would you do this? Because I had finally remembered who the account belonged to. The next day, October 13th, I took the binder and headed to the Charlotte Public Library on 6th Street. It was quiet inside, that special kind of stillness that wraps around you like a church sanctuary. The scent of old paper and toner lingered in the air, and I welcomed it. I found a corner computer station, logged in with my library card, and opened my bank portal. The color-coded spreadsheet I'd been building over the past week sat on the desktop of my flash drive. I added the latest entries, those Sephora and Zara charges, the Uber rides, the mail theft incident, each line marked with date, vendor, and transaction ID. Then I clicked over to Wells Fargo's statement archive and downloaded every monthly statement from the last 3 years, PDF after PDF. I labeled each one with its date range, and I didn't stop until all 36 were neatly filed into folders, named by year. The librarian at the reference desk, a young woman named Tanya, helped me with the printer. I needed double-sided color, high resolution. That's gonna be about $1.20, she said, peering at the stack of documents queuing up on the machine. Worth every penny, I told her. I fed the pages into a 3-hole puncher, while she helped me bind them into a thick presentation folder with clear plastic covers. On the first page, I slipped in the typed title sheet I'd brought from home, Financial Summary, Monroe Household Support, 2021 to 2024. It looked professional, intentional. I wasn't just a woman with hurt feelings anymore. I was a woman with evidence. In the quiet of the printer station, I slipped in one more page, something new. A side-by-side chart labeled Spending by Category, Unauthorized versus Assisted. The numbers didn't lie. $41,500 of support, nearly $2,000 in clearly unauthorized transactions. And that didn't count the forgotten favors or verbal IOUs. Once everything was assembled, I zipped the folder shut and slid it into my tote bag. I didn't feel rage. Not that day. I felt focus. Jamal and Keisha hadn't called since the account lockdown. 3 days of silence. That told me more than any voicemail ever could. When people are quiet, it's not always peace. By Monday evening, October 14th, I decided silence wasn't a shield. It was a warning. So I started making calls. Not to Jamal. Not to Keisha. To people with sense. I started with Pastor Riley. He'd known Jamal since youth choir and had once held Keisha's hand in prayer after a miscarriage. He'd seen our family from the inside, before the rot crept in. I asked if he had 15 minutes after Bible study that night. He said, "For you, Sister Monroe?" "Always." We met in the church basement, the fellowship hall still smelling faintly of sheet cake and pine sol. I didn't bring the binder. Just the handwritten notes and my own composure. They've been using me, Pastor, not in the way folks say lightly. I mean systematically, with documentation, with passwords, with expectation. He nodded slowly. Do you feel safe? I do now, I said, not hesitating, because I've closed every door they thought would stay open. He asked for names. I gave them. He didn't flinch. I'm not asking for spiritual reconciliation, I told him. I'm asking for neutral space. For a meeting. Witnessed. I'll moderate, he said. No grandstanding, just truth. And respect. Next was Ms. Jordan. I stopped by Wells Fargo with a copy of the color-coded transaction timeline. She sat with me in her office again, flipping through the printouts without speaking. When she reached the Sephora page, she just sighed and said, I've seen patterns like this before. Would you be willing to confirm some of this if asked? I said carefully. I don't mean in court, just in the presence of others. She tapped the edge of the paper. I can verify what I've personally handled. Account changes, removal of authorizations, dates of notice. I'll stand on that. Last, I called Trina. Trina worked 30 years as a paralegal before retiring. She used to live 2 doors down before the neighborhood got too new for her taste. We'd shared cobbler and commentary for 20 years. She'd been watching this unfold quietly. I need your eyes on something, I told her. I brought her the binder and sat on her porch as she flipped through every page, her red pen marking suggestions and gaps. You've got a case here, she muttered. Not legal, necessarily, but moral? Documented? Hell yes, this is a reckoning folder. We sat under her porch light as the sky turned lavender. She handed the binder back to me like it was holy. You ready to show your work? She asked. Yes, I said. And I'm not whispering this time. On Wednesday, October 16th, I stood in line at the post office with a flat manila envelope tucked beneath my arm, sealed and notarized, addressed to the apartment Keisha and Jamal shared. Inside, my boundary, in black ink on legal paper. The letter was simple, 2 pages, 1 copy for them, 1 for my files. It stated, plainly and without sentiment, that as of October 16th, 2024, I, Mrs. Eleanor Monroe, would no longer be financially supporting Jamal Monroe or Keisha Monroe in any form, monetary, in kind, or through account access. This revocation included all co-signed obligations, previously verbal agreements, and shared digital services. Trina helped me draft it. She insisted on the certified mail route. Paper trail, always, she said, tapping her pen against the signature line like a gavel, even when they pretend not to receive it. At the USPS counter, the clerk weighed the envelope and affixed a barcode. I paid $8.25 for certified tracking. He handed me the receipt and I slid it into the front pocket of my binder, behind the tab marked Communication Attempts. On the walk back to my car, the trees along the sidewalk had started shedding, their crisp leaves dragging shadows across my shoes. I felt light, not triumphant, not vindicated, just aligned, like something inside me had clicked into place. That evening, I received their response, not with a phone call, but a formal-looking envelope jammed into my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a 2-paragraph letter typed in 12-point font, full of phrases like emotional distress and unreasonable revocation. It wasn't signed. There was no date, just a vague warning about severing familial ties and the potential impact on legacy assets. I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not bitterly, not in pain, just one sharp exhale. Because I knew the tone. It was Keisha's voice, wearing Jamal's passive sentence structure like an ill-fitting blazer. A ghostwriter of guilt. I folded the letter, hole-punched it, and slid it behind the Responses tab in the binder. Let them perform professionalism. Let them posture. I wasn't playing a role anymore. I was filing records. My only reply came that night by text. Certified letter received. Acknowledged. No further clarification needed. On Friday, October 18th, I got a call from Ms. Jordan. They were here? She said quietly. I didn't need to ask who. They? I asked anyway, just to give her space to tell it her way. Jamal and Keisha. Came in loud. Keisha was the one talking, mostly. Accused the bank of withholding information. Claimed you'd been manipulated. Manipulated. That was rich, considering the 2 of them had turned me into an ATM with a heartbeat for over 3 years. But Ms. Jordan wasn't finished. She said, and I quote, "My mother-in-law is a vulnerable elder, and I have a duty to intervene before she gives away everything." The audacity was so thick I had to sit down. She used the phrase elder abuse, Eleanor, in public, in front of our staff. Told the teller she was legally entitled to view your records, since you're, in her words, slipping. I clenched the phone tighter. What did you do? I did my job, Ms. Jordan said firmly. I pulled the authorization file, showed her the revocation form you signed, showed her the timestamp, the ID verification, the updated beneficiary designations. She got quiet when I said everything was locked. And Jamal? He looked embarrassed, but he didn't stop her. Didn't say a word until she asked for a manager. Then he tried to play peacemaker, said you were, just confused, and that he was only there to de-escalate. Classic. Let Keisha push the limits, then step in like the voice of reason after the damage is done. Ms. Jordan paused. We've logged the incident, filed an internal report. If they show up again, we'll have security handle it. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Thank you. You're not alone, she said. They came in trying to shame you, but all they did was confirm exactly why you needed to act. After we hung up, I made a note on my yellow pad. Attempted bank breach, October 18th. Report on file. I then opened my email and sent a copy of the binder's table of contents to Pastor Riley and Trina. No commentary, just the subject line. For transparency, ahead of Sunday. Let them keep trying to strong-arm behind closed doors. The next door they walked through would not be quiet, and I would not be alone on the other side. Sunday evening, October 20th, I unlocked the side door of Gethsemane Baptist's Fellowship Hall. The room smelled of folding chairs, lemon oil, and faint resolve. I'd reserved it under Family Transparency Meeting Monroe household, and Pastor Riley had offered to moderate. He arrived first, Bible in one hand, notepad in the other. Want me seated up front or standing to the side? He asked. Front, I said. Neutral posture, no hand-holding, we're not doing counseling. He nodded, pulled the podium 2 inches back, and adjusted the mic. The room held about 20 chairs, though I'd only set 6. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted witnesses. Trina came in next, wheeling a rolling suitcase full of copies. She wore a burgundy blazer, the same color she used to wear in court. I brought printouts, she said. 5 copies of everything, just in case they try to play dumb. I placed the main binder at the podium and connected my laptop to the projector screen. The first slide was already queued up. Monroe Financial Support Timeline, 2021 to 2024. At 5:54 p.m., I heard the front door open and close. Heels clicked first. Keisha's stilettos, all polish and posture. Jamal followed, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Keisha smiled like we were attending a brunch. Didn't expect this to be such a production, she said, glancing at the projection. Looks like a deposition. I didn't respond. I handed them both a manila folder. Inside, their copy of the ledger, the account closure confirmations, and a full breakdown of every dollar they had either spent or requested since March 2021. At the top, bolded, $41,500 direct financial outflow. Jamal flipped through his quietly. Keisha didn't open hers. At 6 p.m. sharp, Pastor Riley cleared his throat. Let's begin. He read an opening statement, short, respectful, factual. He confirmed I'd asked for a mediated setting due to, quote, persistent financial entanglements and repeated oversteps. Then he stepped back and gestured to me. I stood, binder open, voice steady. I'm here to present truth, that's all. No dramatics, no threats, just documentation. I clicked to the next slide. It showed 4 transactions from Sephora and Zara. Dates, times, bank identifiers. Keisha's smirk flickered. Jamal shifted in his chair. The room was quiet, but not empty. At exactly 6:23 p.m., I opened the final tab of the binder, labeled in thick black ink, Voices. The plastic sheet protector held 3 printed texts, 2 transcribed voicemails, and 1 email from Wells Fargo. But it was what came next that made Jamal sit forward. I pressed play on a small black speaker. Keisha's voice filled the room, casual and sharp-edged. Honey, your mom changed the password. I can't use her card for shopping anymore. Her laugh followed, light and careless. Pastor Riley didn't flinch, but he glanced at Jamal, who now had one hand over his mouth. Keisha's face stilled. No frown, no surprise, just a hard blink. She hadn't expected recordings. I didn't look away from her. I reached into my tote and pulled out a document with a red paperclip. The revocation of bank authorization, signed, witnessed, and filed. I gave you both access, and you turned it into entitlement. You didn't ask anymore. You expected. Then you got reckless. I passed a copy of the security footage stills. Keisha at my mailbox, timestamped. Trina had annotated the printouts with arrows and footnotes, noting the postal offense statutes for reference. Jamal muttered, "You didn't have to do all this." I turned to him then. "You think this is petty?" He didn't answer. "I changed my locks, my passwords, my patterns, because the two of you treated me like a line item. Not a mother, not even a person, just a resource to be mined." Pastor Riley cleared his throat. "We're not here for reconciliation," he said, calm but firm. "We're here for clarity and accountability." I handed him a folder identical to theirs. Same documentation, same ledger, same annotated printouts. "One for the church archives," I said, "in case anything's disputed later." Then I passed a second copy to Trina. "And one for legal consultation." Keisha stood abruptly. "This is character assassination." "No," I said. "It's character inventory. And unfortunately for you, I kept receipts." She walked out without another word, heels tapping like an angry metronome across the tile. Jamal sat for a moment longer. Then he rose, eyes unfocused. "I'll call you later," he mumbled. "No need," I said, my voice clear. "You've already told me everything I needed to know." Pastor Riley closed the folder slowly. "You did the right thing, Sister Monroe." And finally, I believed it. The next morning, October 21st, I opened the front door and stepped out into the crisp air with a quiet calm in my chest. The wind carried a faint scent of pine mulch and chimney smoke, Charlotte easing into the edges of fall. I had slept deeply, for the first time in months. Gary, from Keymaster Locksmith, pulled into the driveway right on time. He greeted me with a nod and a tool belt slung across his hip. "No small talk, just purpose. I'll need access to all 3 entry points," he said. "Front, back, and the sunroom door." I handed him the keys and let him get to work. Each click and twist of metal felt like punctuation, full stops where once there had been ellipses. When he finished, he handed me a sealed plastic bag with the discarded hardware and a crisp invoice, $153, full lock replacement. October 21st, 2024. I paid in cash and added the receipt to my binder that now sat like a silent sentinel on the hallway table. After Gary left, I walked to the curb and opened the mailbox. Empty. I smiled, then slid in a fresh note I'd written on firm linen paper. "Mail access has changed. All unauthorized use will be reported." I taped it inside the door and locked it with the new key. Inside, I gathered the spare keys into a zippered pouch and placed them in the fireproof safe along with my birth certificate, deed, and power of attorney forms, recently updated. No duplicates this time. No copies left in drawers. That afternoon, a final text came through from Jamal. "I guess we know where we stand." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because the message required no response. It was not a question, not a gesture of change. It was a closing note, one he hadn't realized I'd already written myself. I deleted the thread, blocked the number, and turned off the ringer on the landline. Then I brewed a cup of mint tea, pulled my shawl around my shoulders, and sat in the kitchen, where the sunlight poured through the windows in quiet gold. No drama, no noise, just a clean floor, warm light, and keys that no longer opened doors for anyone else. No gloating, no revenge, just return to myself.